Hello again. Welcome to Ron Smith's series of videos on the fundamentals of lettering for the hand engraver. This is Bill Bennett. This is the second section of Ron's teachings of script lettering. We recommend that you study Ron's script lettering section A before watching this one, because many parts of this section B will build upon what Ron presented in section A. In this section, the second one, Ron will discuss the beauty line, problem letters, monograms and balance, developing a great eye, and cutting procedure. As with the other videos in this series, we made them back in 1987 by VHS tape. Please forgive the video and audio quality, especially when you compare them to today's standards. But Ron's teachings are just as valuable today as they were in 1987. At the end of this video, you can experience Ron doing some of his engraving lettering as well as him playing his guitar. Hope you will enjoy that too. So now let's go to Ron as he further demonstrates script lettering for the hand engraver.
Okay, the beauty curve is a very important line, and that's the major stem portion of all capital letters, and it's the beautiful part of the letter. It's a line that is been used for centuries, and because of its beauty in designing of all kinds, you'll see it used in aircraft, you'll see it used in automobiles, you'll see it used in anything with beauty, and primarily that's why you'll see it in knife blades. It's a compound line which curves and cuts back on itself. Line of beauty. It's beauty curves. Make it more beautiful in the script alphabet. It's thickened in a certain part and thinned out on what we call hairline in another part of the letter. That's the beauty line. You find that in a good many of the capital letters of the alphabet, and it has to be performed precisely in order to be as beautiful as its potential. The roundness of your letters must be smooth arcs. No. There's a little flaw, not hardly visible, but it's a little flat spot on that. So these, you have to pay particular attention to the roundness of your arc, script lettering also. Some of that'll get ironed out in the cutting. It's harder to draw it than it is to cut it once you become accomplished with the tools. Anyone who can cut well can execute good letters once they understand the letters, can construct the designing of them. See, let's go to some of the letters that'll give you problems in the script alphabet. Double-sided letter, single letter C and the A. The B, the G, those type of letters have their own particular characteristics that if you understand them, you can compensate for them. The W, the V, they're difficult letters to work with because of the number of lines they have within them, depending on what you're doing with them, whether it be a monogram or whether it just be a set of initials. The V, for instance. Now, how do we determine if we've determined the slant of this type? If we take the V and we put our beauty line the same slant as this line is. And then we put our leg of our V over here. What have we done? We've created an illusion of more lean to the letter, because actually what your eye does is divide this and makes an arrow point out of it. Your eye will always divide a situation like this and equalize it, and your center will be here. Now, if we draw a line through that, what we've done is, see, we've violated the plan. So, compensate for that problem, what you do is an imaginary line, which is in keeping with the slant that you've developed. You'll say, here's your imaginary slant, in keeping with this line right here. Now, since your eye divides the V in half, let's do that. Let's put half of the V on this side, half of the V on that side. Now we haven't violated anything. In reality, again, because your eye divides this or separates it in two parts and makes it point in a certain direction or indicate this slant right here, that if you do that, I've got it a little bit off, but if you do that, this letter will line up with any letter you put beside it, using this slant over here, which I think, and it's hard for me to see this up this close, but I think I've got it about right. See, the V doesn't violate the B. It's pretty much like it's leaning in the same direction, even though you've got two definitely opposing lines to that slant. This one leans a little too far, this one doesn't lean far enough, but it still belongs. Same applies to the W. You have a double, see, two double V's there is what you've got, and the M is the same way. You've decided on a slant, this slant, okay, you produce your imaginary slant right there. For a W, go and you divide that. Got that a little wide. That doesn't violate this slant. M is the same way. These are the letters you'll have problems with in your layouts. You'll find, for some reason, sometimes you just can't seem to get them to look like they're going the same direction as your other letters, and that's the reason. M, the way I'll usually lay out an M is I'll do the back portions of the letter. Like so. You see, that's not exactly with this line right here. It's slightly off. I'll come out of this line. Now, you'll notice in the construction of an M, this one isn't actually spaced rhythmatically because I've got two varying distances, and properly done, that shouldn't be that way. These spaces should match in here. These two lines should be parallel. And these two lines should be parallel. This line parallel, this line parallel. But now that I've accomplished that, it is in keeping with this slanted line, even though I've divided this space. Again, put it on each side of that imaginary line. Now, another letter you're going to have a little trouble with is the S. Now, the script alphabet, the book will show you how to do an S that I've never felt like really belonged in the alphabet. So I never used it. But here's the book S. had people come to me and say, that doesn't look like an S, that looks like a P or a T or anything but an S. Well, simply because of its construction, it's confusing. And not that it's confusing to you, but it's confusing to other people. They can't make an S out of that for anything, for some reason. A lot of the time, it's the way you construct it. If you get heavy lines in the wrong places, you create a problem. And so I don't even use this style. I don't use the book S at all. I've quit doing that because I've had quite a few people complain about it. I use the old handwriting S. I violate that curve drastically, but I make the slant of the letter dividing this line equally both sides. That indicates that slant. The beauty curve of the S violates all the other beauty curves in the alphabet, but it doesn't cause any problem as long as you maintain that the direction of that letter with the other one. If I, for some reason, want to add to this letter and create something for the sake of a monogram, sometimes I'll come up here and add a little deal like that, just a hair on it. Doesn't destroy the letter or doesn't confuse the letter or doesn't make people wonder what it is, but it's just enough that it say I've got another letter right over here and I need to do some of that space right there. And I'll add that on. And it fits. And there's no standard rules for monograms, particularly providing you maintain your slants and everything. You can just go all over the place with extra lines. The most important thing being that the rhythm and the slant of the letter is the important thing. Let me show you what I mean. All right, here we're going to have a situation where we're going to lay out a monogram. We have last name initial in the center, which is a common situation, and two smaller letters on the sides. Laying out the height of the smaller letters and the height of the larger last name initial. Now, depending on the article you're putting this on, if it's a irregular space, or you determine whether you want a slanted monogram or an upright stationary monogram, according to the space you're working in. Let's do an upright monogram. We'll take the letter B and use it for the last name. And for the other two letters on the side, let's have a W. And an I. Okay, we've created a problem. Not so obvious to you, but to me it's obvious. We've created a problem with balance here. We've got a white letter over here and a skinny letter over here. And if you look at it closely and remove your guidelines, you start seeing it's a little heavy on one side. To compensate for that, a lot of times you can tie this whole thing together with addition of lines. Like I said before, you can do all kinds of things to make this monogram balanced. What did that do?
Tied it all together.
Tied it all together. Okay. In the construction of a letter, as we make or fill in or cut, we have wide portions to these letters, which will make the letter outstanding, and you won't have a hard time telling what the letter is. Where in before I did this, you were having, you know, you get a little confused with all the lines crossing each other. But once you establish bulk, where bulk is supposed to be in the script letter, and you eliminate the confusion of the extra lines. Oops, I think that one a little bit meaty there. You have any trouble separating those letters?
No, not now.
Construction of a monogram, the little hairlines that you apply to the monogram are mainly for tying things together and breaking up space and creating balance, where the heavy proportion, the heavy lines indicate the letter themselves. Yeah, those letters stand out really well. Before I erase that, again, I was showing you, if we've got a little appendage that sticks out over here, and sometimes if you're doing this on a space, and you've got the rest of this thing centered, so this is the space you're doing this in, you got the rest of this thing centered, but you got a hole right over here. What do you do with that? You know, it'd be nice. It's not totally necessary, providing the thing has a pretty appealing overall appearance, to do anything with this at all. But if you did want to, you could put a little hairline in there like that. And that just kind of balanced the whole thing right off. There's not any limit to what you can do for it as addition to the lines, as long as you keep it as try to keep from making it confusing to the eye.
When we were looking at lettering a while ago, we looked at spaces between letters. You look at spaces there.
Yeah, certainly.
Is that what determines the problem?
The distance from here to here and from here to here. You create visual holes. There's one right there, which tends to make this one look a little further away than that one. And again, you compensate for that with a little line like that. That was better done if I come up in there a little higher. Kind of cut through that space and made that not appear to be such a hole.
So it's training your eye to look not just at the letters, but where there's no letters. It's
Right.
the holes
That's
between
right.
them.
Sure. There's another way you can solve this problem too. In the case of a monogram, you can exaggerate and distort things slightly. Bring that over just a tad more. And, I'm having a little trouble seeing this from up this close. And that tends to pull it all in, balance it. See, that wasn't even noticeable, that little bit of movement that I did there. Now, as I said before, it takes upper and lower case letters to lay out script lettering. Don't come off there. Again, depending on what you're doing, that is not a strict rule. That's just a general rule for inscriptions and so forth, where you have plenty of room to work with, and you're not having a balance problem. Where you have a balance problem, again, you can violate those things. If we were going through the center of a ID bracelet, for instance, I explained that you could do your lowercase letters through the center and then overlap your capital letter. And you can do that under any And this is where the artist in you comes out, and it's fun to be creative. So let's take a situation where we want to do a person's name in a fancy style and create some beauty with it and creativity with it. Let's see, let's do a G. Okay, I've already just right off the bat violated both of those height lines. But go right there and we violated a number of things according to our layout line. We've gone back after and centered that up with just a couple of the decorative lines. Let's take out our guidelines and see what I mean. Instead of the eye focusing on the portion of the name, major part of the name, and reading the name and indicating that for the center of the object, we've added some lines which makes this whole thing right here a design, all balanced, disbalanced within the design, and creates a pleasing situation.
Now, what is it that makes it balanced? I mean, I can understand it looks good, but to tell you why,
Well,
is it because of
we've got
spaces?
equal spaces in here,
Okay.
and we've got a similar curl here, here, and here.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've done is we've kind of rounded this whole thing off. Now let's take these away. This would be standard.
My eye tends to go towards the G and
Exactly.
focus there.
Exactly. This has so much weight. This has less importance. Probably would be better to cut the size of the G down just a little bit, and or sometimes you can add just enough there to make it not look so obvious. If your layout's done well, none of that will really be too objectionable, and the creativity of the design is all pretty. And even that, sometimes you'll see a very large letter with done this way. We call this in the trade cross shading. Make that letter really outstanding.
That gives it even more weight then.
That even gives it more weight. What you've got here is kind of a first name letter initial, and then a subtle granny there, that makes this letter real important. And, kind of a pretty way of doing things.
So that in itself is acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's acceptable. You got it's still balanced within this area. As long as you balance, you might want to put a little weight over here. Then again, that's long as your letters are slanted and all moving in the right direction, and your arcs are smooth and all that, there's not any set down rules in ornamental script that you have to stay within particularly. The most critical thing is just that all of your letters are marching along in the same slant, and that your spacing between your letters is all equal. And after that, then the rest is up to the creativeness in you, providing that you maintain pretty good overall balance. The capital letters are going to be larger than the rest of your letters anyway. Not anything you can do about that. So if they're going to be larger, doesn't matter if they're a little larger, just to divide up the space. Let me put another G in here. Show you what happens if you don't split the difference. We'll put a proper one in here. This is going to look all right to you, and it'll look all right to everybody else. But for the sake of design and creativity, it's still, see, it's overwhelming on what you've done. You created a void right in here. But that's not objectionable either. It's because people have learned to accept the oversize of the capital letters, and it's not a problem. It might bother you as far as overall balance is concerned, but it doesn't create any problems because we've already accepted it to be larger than the other letters. Your eye becomes fairly sensitive to those things once you've learned the rules for them and begin to learn to apply them. You become more and more sensitive to voids, lopsided design, holes in lettering, and those sort of things just begin to jump right out at you. You'll go through a commercially printed item and you'll even see those things, and they'll jump right out at you. They just talk to you. Those holes and faces. And we're gonna do the script alphabet, small letters. Go. Now you say, what in the world is that? Well, that's A, B, C, D, E, F. Let's connect the line. A. B. B. E. F. Now, generally speaking, those are fairly well balanced, fairly well spaced. I've got a few little errors there. As I back up, I can see that it being up close to them, it's kind of hard to tell. But in my layout on an actual article, that's exactly the way I did it. I rarely ever lay the letters out, but instead I indicate letters. That's an A. That's a B. That's a C. And what I do in my cutting is I go around this. Like that. I go around this. Like that. there's a procedure for cutting these letters. We'll cover those later, but this allows you to establish your slant and maintain it throughout the whole line of letters that you're doing. But it's fast. Once you understand your skeletons, you don't spend a whole lot of time drawing the whole letter, trying to get it just right, but rather you establish your balance and your slant right off the bat. You can go on and continue with your whole inscription just by doing the skeleton. And then when you get ready to cut it, normally if there's just one line, well, I'll go ahead and cut it. If there's more than one line, I'll sometimes scribe on those skeletons, and or I'll have to scribe the whole letter actually if I'm going to scribe it on, because once you wipe it off, you can't put guidelines by scribing them, because you don't want those left on the metal. But you'll have to go and you'll have to scribe the whole letter. But if you've got 3 or 4 lines, that's almost the only way you can do that sometimes, because if you don't, you're going to end up rubbing off some of your layout. Also, in the execution of several lines of engraving, well, I'll start at this edge over here, work this way until I get all of these down cuts, and then I'll start at the 3rd line down here, and I'll work this way until I get all of the up cuts. In other words, what I'm doing is I'm allowing myself places to rest my hand by starting on the outside of these things and working toward the center. If I go to cutting right in here, well, I'm going to start rubbing this stuff that's surrounding it out. So I start at the edges and work in toward the centers, and where I've got several lines, and my hands are going to be on the work. We'll go into more of that later on.
This is Bill again. Ron and I have agreed that we add more information about the actual cutting of script letters. For example, we will start with the letter A, and this is what we want it to look like when we're finished engraving it. While we engrave it, keep in mind slant, rhythm, and harmony, which Ron's already described. Harmony is the line relationship, one line to the other within each letter. It's also the line relationship between the lines in all the letters in the project. Begin with the main stems first. These will have the flares to give them more weight. Next, finish with the hairlines. Now let's look more closely at the cuts. We see that all these cuts are made in a counterclockwise radius direction. The reason for this is for a right-handed engraver. In the beginning, gravers were pushed by hand to make the cut. While engraving with the pushed graver, the graver was placed at the start of the cut. The right thumb was placed down firmly upon the piece, if possible, not interfering with the layout. The left thumb was placed firmly against the right thumb to aid in preventing slipping. The cut would be made counterclockwise with the right thumb as a pivot. This pivot enabled the most natural way of the cut. The advent of a vise, such as the ball vise, enabled an even more reliable way of cutting. With a vise capable of being turned, the counterclockwise cut direction for a right-handed engraver was still more natural. However, experienced hand engravers developed the ability to cut both counterclockwise and clockwise, and even without a pivot thumb. In the example of the directions of cutting the A, It is obvious that the left-handed engraver would cut oppositely and in the clockwise direction and use the left thumb as the pivot point and the right thumb to aid in preventing slipping. When the power-assisted engraving tools came into existence, almost all these procedures went out the window. Power tools, once mastered, enabled great ease in cutting both directions. Although having the tool hand thumb be a pivot is still advantageous, again, if not damaging the layout. If you need a layout transfer technique that is extremely durable, accurate, and readable, please see the link to another of my videos in the description below. It is just not as quickly done as Ron's wax and talc method. In view of this information, please evaluate all the remaining letters of the alphabet and develop your own method of the direction of each cut that works best for you. This concludes Ron's teaching of script lettering. We hope this information will be very valuable to you. Now here's Ron doing some engraving. The background music is Ron playing his guitar. Not at the same time though. That would be something to see if he could, wouldn't it? Thank you and have great engraving. This is a Be Back to Be production.